and welcome. This is the Hypnotorious Podcast. I'm David Barron, and with me is John Wylie. John?
Hi, everybody.
Hey, we are both hypnotists. John working in Boise, Idaho. I reside in Oregon. I also have a practice on the East Coast as well. What we're here to do is basically just talk about hypnosis as a practice, as an interesting thing, and really for anyone. We're trying to make this as broadly interesting as possible. So if you're just like the idea of hypnosis, this can be wonderfully informative and fun. If you are a professional hypnotist, we're certainly hoping you'll get some great information from this. And I think especially with the topic that we have today,
Yeah, absolutely.
Professional hypnotists and those who want to be professional hypnotists could listen up, because nothing is more educational than someone else's suffering, unless it's your own.
Right.
So what we wanted to talk about I got a call from somebody who was very interested in starting a hypnosis practice, and basically wanted my recommendations and my advice, with the basic fear of having spent $50,000 or so to build this practice, and all of the time is spent looking at the wall or the door waiting for a customer to come in. And and believe me, I've been there, so I know that anxiety. So John, what would be the very first thing you would recommend? We were talking about this earlier, and you made a few comments.
Yeah, well, I think most people out there, when they're considering starting a hypnotherapy practice, I know this was the case for me, is I wanted to be really careful about my cash flow situation, because there are bills that need to be paid, and rent or mortgage and groceries and all that stuff. And so my approach when I started off was I was actually working at another job, and I decided to do my hypnosis part-time, and to gradually taper off from the job that I was doing, scaling that back more and more over time. And that was the process that I used, and that actually worked quite well for me, because I didn't want to just, dive in, because people need to understand that if you're going to be going into a hypnotherapy practice or a hypnotherapy business, you're not just a hypnotherapist. You also have to have clients.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, boy.
And so there's marketing involved. You have to become a marketer, so that you have to wear those two hats, and you got to get fairly good at both of them. And sometimes both of those things take some time to work out.
Right. That's a good thing. We'll be talking a little bit about marketing as well. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, I did the exact opposite that you did.
Okay. Good contrast.
Yeah, if you can imagine, someone perhaps facing a barbarian horde with their back to a cliff. That was me. Okay. I managed to get some money to start the practice. I moved completely to a new location. I started doing hypnosis in San Jose, California, and please, anyone thinking about doing this, learn from my error. It was panic. It was just total panic, because there were, and I vividly remember, first of all, I vividly remember two things about my sleep, which was I had these vivid dreams all the time, partly from just coping with the anxiety, and then also the waking up with the pounding heart. Right. So I totally agree with you on that. Start cautiously. If you have time to plan this out, there are a couple ways that I would totally recommend, and one is definitely what you did, John, which is have a part-time job and have some income to begin with.
Right.
The additionally, take your time in and go into detail planning it. You want to look around. I mean, you got really lucky. You found, I mean, the first chiropractor you talked with, I think you said,
Right.
who said, "Yeah, I could use a hypnotist better than one of these massage therapists that we have over
Yeah.
here."
Do you want me to tell that story for those that haven't listened to that episode?
Yeah, go right ahead.
So in a previous episode, we discussed some of the elements of what we're going to be talking about today. And one of the approaches that I used is I wanted to find an office space. Obviously, as a hypnotherapist, especially starting out, you really don't need very much space. So what I decided to do is talk to some of the other healthcare professionals that were in my area, the area that I wanted to open my practice, and just explore the possibility of maybe renting at low cost just a single room that wasn't being used, right? So I got online and I did a Google search for I started with chiropractors because I knew there were a lot of chiropractors out there, and I figured, I got to start somewhere. So I got this list of chiropractors, and the very first one that I called, who's now a good friend of mine, I talked to him, explained my situation. He says, "Wow, that sounds like a great idea." And he told me that he was so sick of working with massage therapists, which are typically, the ones who share the office space. And he had his own reasons for really not enjoying working with them. So that sounds like a great idea. And so I've been sharing office space with him for quite some time. And it's worked really well. It's really low cost, which equals, as you can attest, David, low stress, right?
Yeah.
Because there's enough challenge with opening any kind of a new business. You don't need that. So
right.
Low cost, and it worked out really well.
Right. And I know as far as finding a location, it's going to depend on a lot of different things. One of the things I recommend, and again, it depends on your resources and the time you have to research it, is if you can find an office in a medical office building, so much the better.
Right.
I've heard some
medical, any medical related, healthcare related is going to be a big boost.
Yeah, it adds credibility to you.
Yep.
Additionally, as a side benefit, once you're there for a couple of years, if you haven't pissed off the other doctors, they'll start referring people to you. One of my someone that I know mentioned that they had an office in a medical office building, and they had a glass window which you would walk by from the outside, and they made certain that all of their diplomas and their certificates and their credit units and things like that were visible through that window, so that as the doctors walked by, they saw that this guy meant business and he had studied and did his stuff. So, again, one of the better things that you can do. Personally, what I did, one thing that, again, for expense reasons, is if you go out and you look for what's called an executive office. An executive office works incredibly well. They usually have an existing secretary and a bunch of offices which you can rent by the hour. And depending on the program, you get a phone number, and the secretary will answer it. I have my office in New Hampshire. She always answers it, New Hampshire Hypnosis, how can I help you? And you can tell them exactly how to answer the phone and take the information before they transfer it to you. And that's really wonderful because, this morning, I got this call that said, you've got this lady on the line who wants to talk about hypnosis. I happened to be in the gym, and there were people screaming on one end and rock music on the other. So I said, okay, wait a second. And I rushed to a quiet part of the gym and took the call. So, and again, with the secretary there, it adds credibility.
Right.
They don't, they think that is your secretary. And
Right.
since you're paying it by the hour, and essentially what happens is you're really only paying for when you do have a client.
Right.
And that's a great way to work as well.
And I think it's important along the lines of starting off with a new practice. You don't necessarily want to communicate the fact that you're new, that you're just doing this part-time, right? It's probably in your best interest, even if you're only, let's take someone like in my situation. When I first started out, I was only seeing clients like one day a week in the very beginning, right? And I would book all my sessions for that one day, and then that one day turned into 2 days, and that 2 days turned into 3 days, and progressively grew. But you want to make sure that you're conveying the idea that you're professional.
Yeah.
So when you're scheduling appointments, all you really need to say is, okay, I have an opening on Thursday at 2 o'clock or at 4 o'clock. Which one would you prefer?
Right.
Kind of a thing.
Yeah, like I'm busy. My only opening is this.
Right.
Now, and let me add to that, and I think it's just vitally important. And I never really got this into my head until about several years ago, which is when I had moved to a location. In this case, it was New Hampshire. I knew there were other hypnotists in the area, and when I started my business, I realized I had to sort of change my mindset. I'd still been doing hypnosis for at least 10 years, so I was very, very confident in my ability, and I realized the best way to go into this in a new location is to start off with the mindset that I am the preeminent hypnotist. I'm not just the latest. I'm not the premier hypnotist. I'm the preeminent. I'm the one that everyone is going to be competing against.
The best.
The best. And once I had that in my head, it helped me sort of engineer how my secretary would answer the phone. It helped me engineer my website, how I would respond to clients, and everything else. Everything from setting up the room to asking for referrals. It's all presumed that you're getting one of the most professional and experienced hypnotists in existence, and you're lucky we had an opening for you. So I always think in terms of preeminence, the very best.
Now, what would you recommend for someone who obviously is not in that position, and who would have a hard time? Like when I first started out, when I was really new and just beginning, I certainly didn't feel like the best.
Right.
I knew I wasn't the best, and it would be difficult to project an image because it didn't feel truthful, right? So what would you suggest for somebody that is who doesn't feel like they're the best?
It is totally an inside game. It's a head game. First of all, get experience, get successes, work in a specialty that you're good at. Like, for example, I got really good at helping people with stopping smoking. Then I got really good at helping people with anxiety. If you can do hypnosis in a social setting just for fun, get the experience so you're comfortable with it. And again, it's a mind game. You have to think of yourself first and foremost, without apology, as being, if not an authority, the authority. And you don't demonstrate it by being certain of everything you say, but just by being confident in what you say. So it's a lot in presentation. It takes some time to realize if you're going to present every part of your business like this, start with yourself. So start with yourself. If you're an authority, you're not going to be stammering a lot. You're not going to be hesitating. You're going to be comforting people, looking them straight in the eye, telling them that you can help and that they have a responsibility to follow your instructions, you're going to be holding yourself with a sense of control and ease that demonstrates you have control.
Right.
So you have to practice it when you don't have to practice it. So you have to practice it all the time. That's what I would tell somebody.
And I'll add something here too. One thing that helped me a lot, especially early on, is, and this is speaking specifically to those new folks. You may not be the best hypnotist in the world. You may not even be the best hypnotherapist in the country or in your state or maybe even in your city when you first start off. But relative to that client that's coming to see you, you are the expert. You know infinitely more about hypnosis after going, doing whatever training you've gone through than the typical person is going to know.
Right.
So in that context, in that situation, you can adopt that position, that prestige, and have that confidence as the expert, because relative to that person that you're talking to, you know infinitely more than that other person does. So go ahead and take that on, even if it's just in that context, and feel that confidence.
Right. I totally agree with you. Once you practice it for a while,
this is a very simple test.
It makes a difference in your presentation. But I also consider that you want to make every part of your presentation, from your office to how you answer the phone, demonstrating that.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you would do that, but if you mentally present yourself as the authority, think of those people who are doctors, who everyone refers, the surgeon that everyone refers to. How does he present himself? And you'll find he's very straightforward and confident. It will make a difference. And you learn incredibly from it. You'll also learn that when you present yourself as that authority, people just follow you. It becomes fun. If you present yourself as an authority and you tell someone to close their eyes, seal them tightly shut, so tightly shut they don't even open, even when you try, my goodness, they follow your instructions and their eyes are locked shut. So it only has benefits. It only has benefits. Yeah, I wanted to, anything else you want to add to that? There are a couple of things I wanted to mention. One is, again, this is a lesson I learned. So I moved from New Hampshire, major city, Manchester, near the capital of Nashua. Mm-hmm. Had a fair population, had a number of hypnotists, and I moved to a relatively rural area in Oregon. Had no hypnotists. Economically, it was not as economically advanced as where I'd moved from.
Affluent.
Thank you. Affluent.
Yeah.
And I immediately noticed the challenge, which is, first of all, people in this area where I moved to, if you just do the research, they don't search for hypnosis that often on Google.
They don't even know that they don't know.
Right. They've heard of hypnosis, but they've never even considered that there'd be a professional in their area. So in that transition, I had to do something entirely different. I had to do an entirely different form of outreach. And that was more one-on-one, doing a lot more social interactions and like fairs, street fairs and farmers markets where I hand out information so that people just become aware that I am there. And it includes handing out my cards. It includes, wearing my name tag that says, hypnotist David Barron. So I would say that if you're starting a business of hypnosis, consider the location. I would highly recommend you start off with a semi-urban setting, a city that has probably well, I would say at least 50,000 people, and I believe it or not, has a lot of hypnotists there.
Yeah.
The reason you want a lot of hypnotists there already is because you know it will support a hypnotist.
Right.
The other reason is it gives you in combat mode. These are the people who are going to now compete against me. So in that attitude of being the preeminent, you can now sort of uplift yourself by seeing what they're doing and see how you can do it better.
Right. And I think that's an important thing to understand, that this concept of a rising tide lifts all boats. When I was first getting started in hypnotherapy, I did a search, and one of the first things I looked for was how many other hypnotherapists there were, and I was dismayed. David, to discover that there were like 3 or 4 others. And I'm like, oh man, I'm going to have to compete with these others. But what I learned is, especially after I started working with the chiropractor, is I realized how many chiropractors there were, and I talked to my chiropractor friend about the competition. He says, well, actually, it's a really good thing that there are lots of chiropractors, because people now understand that chiropractic is a legitimately beneficial service. And, everybody recognizes now the benefits of chiropractic, and all the chiropractors benefit. There's a chiropractor, David, on every corner here in Boise. And I would love to see the same thing with hypnosis. Everybody, just like everybody goes to their chiropractor, or at least a big percentage of people, I would like it if everybody went to their hypnotherapist.
Right.
That would be a great thing.
Right. The idea of there being a lot of hypnotists, like I say, it tells you that a hypnotist can be supported there. And what you'll find out, interestingly enough, is that many of those hypnotists, if not most of them, they're not aiming super high. They may have an office, they may work out of their home, they may be doing it part-time, They may have just started, but for many of them, they haven't set their sights on being the preeminent, and it becomes real easy to surpass them. Not to put them down in any sort of way, and absolutely you should network with them as well. But you start to realize that most of these people who are going into hypnosis, like me and like I did, were doing it because they like hypnosis, as opposed to wanting to be really good at business, like you, John.
Well, I got into it because, this is my situation. I got into it because I love helping people. That is really juicy for me. I like when a smoker comes in and they leave a non-smoker, and then they send in their sister, right, to stop smoking from me too. But I had, in all fairness, I'd had some experience in business before. I'd started an additional business and grew it and left it. So I had some experience with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, some business experience certainly isn't going to hurt, because you do have to wear 2 hats.
Right.
You're both a hypnotherapist, but you also have to learn to do the marketing and the business side, or you're not going to be able to help those people that you want to help.
Right. What would you tell people? I mean, let's assume you've gone out there, or at least you've done your homework. You know how you're going to set your business up. What would you tell people about marketing? I mean, and not just advertising, but marketing.
Right. Well, marketing, you want to make sure. Most people, I think, in my opinion, most people do marketing all wrong. They just there's a lot of things that they do wrong, but one of the first things that a person needs to understand is that marketing has got to pay for itself.
Right.
And it's got to be cost effective. You don't want to just put out a bunch of ads. I found some ways to do advertising that was very low cost or free, that also didn't involve a lot of effort. For example, one of the avenues that I chose specifically is I got a website, and I had it set up so that it ranked quite well, and that was a good source of phone consultations and things like that. And then another thing that I did was I went through Groupon, or other.
There's a couple. There's Groupon.
Those
there's
kinds
Yelp.
of.
There's Living
Hello.
Social.
This
Right.
is a very simple
So
test.
things like that worked well, simply because
Strobe light
I did
behind
not
me.
have to pay a
I'm just
penny
seeing how
to acquire
this records
those
and how it plays
new clients.
on your
Now, I didn't make very much on those clients either, but having a background in sales, it really wasn't very difficult for me to frame those Groupon sessions in such a way that people would want to upgrade, and they would see the benefits of going with the regular sessions as opposed to just the Groupon. And they really enjoyed their Groupon sessions. I made them pleasant and fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so oftentimes I would convert a lot of those people to regular clients.
Okay, now you've got me curious. So what was the Groupon deal, and what was it upsold to?
Well,
This is a trade secret. I hope I'm not violating.
well, not too much.
Okay.
I won't go into too much depth, but basically I listened when I talked to the Groupon rep, and I talked to them about what seems to work the best. And I deferred to their judgment. They said, well, you can start off with one session, but what we found is that most people will respond better to a 2-session package. So I was like, well, okay, I don't know about that, but because it was already painful to offer my service for as low as they wanted me to offer it for, and then I had to do it twice. All right, whatever. So I tried it out, and it actually worked quite well. I personally, I know that not all hypnotherapists, not all schools of thought agree with mine, but my personal thought is I like multiple sessions, and it isn't just because of more money, but it's also easier on the client because they don't have performance anxiety. They've never done formal hypnosis before, and here there are some hypnotherapists that are expecting them to be really great at it right out of the chute. It's nice to be able to have a couple sessions to learn the process and to practice relaxing with this strange person that they've never worked with before. So those Groupon sessions, and I would explain early on that these Groupon sessions are designed to be a taste. They're designed to be a taste of formal hypnosis, because people, whether they realize it or not, of course, they experience hypnosis all the time. But this is a little bit different. So this is an opportunity to understand hypnosis, to understand hypnotherapy and how it works, and to have a pleasant experience. And the amazing thing is a lot of people get the change that they want, even just with those Groupon sessions. Now, if you choose, you can go further. If you feel that you need additional help, then you can purchase this package. If it's weight loss, I have the ultimate hypnosis weight loss package. If it's smoking cessation, I have the ultimate hypnosis stop smoking package, right? And those are kind of a continuation, an offshoot of my book, The Ultimate Guide to Hypnosis, right?
Okay.
Which I use as a tool to help educate people and to help generate interest in those packages.
Okay,
too.
so during that, you got me curious now. So what would you give them? I mean, would you go for the big result in the Groupon in those Groupon sessions they purchased?
Well, my primary goal in those Groupon sessions is to give them a really positive first impression of hypnosis, okay? To make it comfortable, to make it fun, to make it pleasant. And so when someone would come in, or when someone comes in with a Groupon, those are really my objectives. And a lot of times people do quit smoking after their first or second session. And they do start to feel differently about their diet and about exercising. So yeah, I get good positive results even with those basic, simple Groupon sessions.
Okay.
And then if they purchase a package, then I give them even more value.
Right. Okay. So I know you and I very quickly, and we can get results in a brief number of sessions. If we really laser in and emphasize it, what I'm hearing is that when you're doing the Groupon marketing, you want them to have a great experience, and I take it you're gonna give them some instruction or suggestions about the changes that they want as well.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Excellent. Now, I would like you had mentioned, you talked about the website. I highly recommend. When I started, 20 years ago, websites had only been around for like 10 years, and I didn't know anything about them really, and I was really encouraged to do it. And now they're a staple. As far as marketing goes, you really need to understand the difference between advertising and marketing. Marketing is really about how you present yourself entirely. And like I say, if you're marketing yourself as the preeminent hypnotist, it isn't just through your advertising. It's through your presentation, how you develop yourself, and speak to people, and your office, everything like that. Nowadays, it also has to be the website, and
you need a good website. That's a must.
Because everyone, if you type in hypnosis in Google, you're going to find everyone locally who does that. So I highly recommend you get a good website and you invest whatever is necessary so you are really high on the rankings there. So you're near the top, and you also get a lot of good testimonials from clients and people who have worked with you.
Yeah, you should have a testimonial generating system in place. That's really important, because if you just expect people to just out of the blue give you a testimonial, in my experience, that's probably not going to happen. I use a method that I learned from Cal Banyan that works really well. I frame it as a feedback form, and on this feedback form, when I'm introduced and I say, feedback is really important so that I can make sure that I'm doing the very best that I can for people. And I say if you're willing to fill this out, it would really help me a lot. And I always present that to them after they've had a really great experience, like one of those situations where they emerge from hypnosis and they look at me with those great big, platter eyes, and they go, "Wow,
yeah,
that was really cool. Well, thank you." And then I make sure to give them that feedback form, and then that feedback form kind of gives them an outline of how to say what you want said. It's an opportunity to write a letter to your hypnotherapist along the lines of,
with a strobe
dear John, in my case, I really enjoyed this, and this. And of course they can list negative things where they think I can improve too, but that's an opportunity for them to leave a really nice testimonial.
Okay. Let me. I'm glad we brought this up, because when I have someone that I work with who's had a really good response on the last visit, I prepare them. They'll usually see me for at least 3 sessions, and if I know they're doing well at the second session, I'll let them know, when you come back, I want to ask you some questions and about the whole experience you've had here. I want to, with your permission, of course, videotape it so that other people will know what it's like. So, and it's very straightforward. We come in and I have a seat, get comfortable, and I start the camera, and I always start by saying, okay, they don't have to sign a form because it's actually on video. You've allowed people to see this, right? Yes. Okay, great. Well, I just wanted to ask you some questions, and the questions range from what did you come in for? What was your result? How would you describe hypnosis to somebody? And I think I had one of the final questions is, who would you recommend hypnosis for? And that's it. And imagine just those things being answered by someone who's satisfied. What do you come in for? What was your result? What was being hypnotized like? And if they say how wonderful and awesome it is, it only makes it good. Who would they recommend it hypnosis for? And they usually say everybody, or at least anybody with my problem.
Right.
So that works really well. And with a video, it also adds an additional level of credibility.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And make sure you set it up nicely so it's a headshot. It's just not a full body shot of a guy in a chair. Things like that.
Yeah. You're a bit more tech oriented than I am.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, a video is pretty easy. I don't use a cell phone. I have a camera. It cost me about $400, but it's pretty nice. And just set it up and record it. It becomes digital. You can put it on YouTube and then your website and everything else. So yeah, I highly recommend you arrange it so that you get video testimonials of some sort or another, and even audio testimonials. Even if, let's say it's a video testimonial that isn't really very appealing. Not that they didn't say anything bad, but it's just not something you feel comfortable. It wasn't good enough to put on the air. You can write it up. You can write it up as a written testimonial.
Right.
So, and I will also, because I do a lot of work through teleconferencing with clients, that makes it a lot more difficult to make a video testimonial. I will say at the end of the sessions, when I work with them, if they've had a good session, I will always remind them and say, look, I just want you, we've worked together, you've gotten a really good result. It would be very appreciated if you go online and write a review. It does not have to be a glowing review, just an honest one. And you can do that on Google, you can do that on Yelp and Facebook, a couple different places. And that doesn't happen. I don't get it as often, but as long as at the very end of the session, it's gone well, I say that I've gotten some good reviews from that, so that does help as well. One of the things I wanted to mention, this will not apply to a lot of people, but it's like one of those mistakes that I would love to talk about.
Okay.
Okay, so I worked on the East Coast in New Hampshire with a pretty darn good hypnosis practice where I was at, and moved for family reasons over to Oregon to a entirely different situation, culture, and economy. Now, what I had done in New Hampshire when I left is I kept the business and I trained someone to do hypnosis, and she did a very good job and eventually stopped. And so I in sort of a panic and spurt of creativity, I took it up by developing a teleconferencing service that was there at my office. And I'm just amazed at how well it works. If that is a situation, in fact, it is entirely possible. It'll take a lot more time because I took time establishing this practice in New Hampshire, but it's entirely possible that you can set up teleconferencing hypnosis businesses in offices where you don't even have to visit or move to in other cities. And that's something we're sort of playing with in our heads on how to do it. But if I had done that when I had moved from New Hampshire to Oregon, it would have been entirely different. In retrospect, I wish I would have done that. It took me a while to figure out exactly how to do it very well. In other words, how to present this as just as good as any other hypnotist, and how to set it up so that it ran smoothly. But that's a mistake that I learned from.
So in retrospect, you would have, when you relocated to Oregon, you would have just, by default, you would have set it up so that you could continue on doing teleconferencing sessions instead of trying to bring someone in, and maybe they were a fit, maybe they weren't, and run into all those problems.
Yeah,
is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Learn through trial and error, and that was one of them. So yeah, definitely, that's something I wanted to mention as well. Let's see, what are some other areas we can talk about as far as if someone really wants to start a business? I think for hypnosis, I would always like to know. I would always be interested in what the motivation is. I mean, for you, it was like you like helping people, and that should be the motivation. What I have found is that even if initially it is not the motivation, it ends up becoming the motivation, because you see people responding so happily, so joyfully, with such positive results, that becomes the reward. I mean, initially when I started, I was just totally fascinated by the idea of hypnosis and changing people's minds, influencing them. So it was not necessarily the most altruistic motive, even though I used it to help people. But that's the reason I started. I really wanted to master this skill. That was my initial motivation. But really quickly, once you see people sitting in this chair with their eyes closed, and for the first time in their life seeing themselves as someone who is worthy and important, seeing them as someone who deserves the change that they want, that it becomes so easy for them, and sometimes they're even crying because it's so dramatic.
Yeah.
That makes every bit of the effort worthwhile.
Yeah, it does. That's a powerful desire that I think all human beings have, is well, at least all good human beings, and I think the vast majority of us, are good people. Yes. But we want to make a difference. We want to do something with our lives that is impactful, that makes a difference to the lives of others. And for me, hypnotherapy really fits the bill. And there are other reasons too why I want to be a hypnotherapist. I am sick and tired of working for other people and getting screwed over in the corporate world, and I'm not gonna do that anymore. So that's a big motive for me too, is just being able to do my own thing.
Yeah, I will tell people I'm not promising any of this to be easy, but it'll certainly be worthwhile. You will certainly learn a lot by committing to do it. I might also recommend for someone who wants to start off, get a good business coach. If you don't have a lot of business experience, get a good business coach who will will ask questions you wouldn't have thought of answering, and that helps certainly.
And maybe a mentor.
Yes.
Someone who has been there, done that. Someone who has experience doing successfully what you want to do.
Right.
Like maybe a more experienced hypnotherapist in your area, or somebody who isn't even necessarily in the area, so that there aren't any concerns with creating more competition and stuff like that, if that's a concern. Right. Even though we've already I think kind of debunked that, but for those that still have that concern, so find somebody in a different city that has had success.
Right.
And be willing to be really bad at it at first. Anything worth doing well is worth doing really, really crappy at first. And I really believe that.
Yes.
Because if you go into it thinking, I've got to be perfect, I've got to do it. No, you don't. Just start. Just begin and be open and willing and enthusiastic about just, for lack of a better word, just fuck it up. Just totally, be terrible at it at first, because it's the nature of human beings to do better with practice. You'll get better. It's going to be an ongoing learning. I'm still learning so much. There's still so much that I recognize I could be doing so much better. And I always try to remind myself to be willing to just totally screw it up at first. That's okay, because you're going to get better in time as you continue to practice.
Well, I wish people could see me nodding my head. But you're absolutely right. I cannot think of a better way of closing the podcast than with what you just said, John.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful.
You're welcome.
So, yeah, it's about time. We sort of need to put it on a roll and wrap it up. So this has been the Hypnotorious Podcast. I'm David Barron, and with me is
John Wylie.
And if there are any questions, any particular interests that you have about hypnosis, we would love to address them. And it doesn't matter if it's just an initial, curiosity about hypnosis from someone who's just fascinated by it, and it doesn't matter if you're a professional who's been doing it. Any questions are wide open. We would love to address them here in the podcast. So until next time, thank you very much, John. This has always been fun.
Lots of fun.
Okay, guys.
Appreciate it, David.
Please take care. Give us a call. Contact us if you have any questions. Take care.
Bye-bye.